Today we're going to be doing gesture drawing of the human skull. As you recall, we started off talking about the detritus and the elements of drawings, which essentially is we begin with a mark, then we move on to use line, and in the process of using line, we look to create either geometric or organic shapes. So in drawing the human skull, it sometimes is very helpful and essential to begin with a geometric shape to get things sort of sorted out, to make it easier to find where all the anatomical features are going to go. And then you can slowly transition that into organic shapes. So looking very quickly here at the human skull, we have a little replica here. As you can see from the front, we have the head is sort of an egg-shaped oval. So I think it's always particularly beneficial to begin with an egg-shaped oval. Sometimes people will begin with a circle to represent the cranium area and then add the egg-shaped oval portion to add in the lower chin. So here then if we look at this in profile, you can see how you can begin with an egg-shaped oval and then add a second egg-shaped oval to get the back portion of the head. If we were to remove the lower mandible, this is now known as the cranium. Okay, when the mandible here is connected, then this is known as, let me get this in here, right? There we go, gotta get the hinges in. So this is, in its entirety, this is known as the human skull. But again, once we remove the lower mandible, then this is the cranium. And as you can see, it makes somewhat of a circular shape. So you can use either a circle or ultimately in the end, the egg-shaped oval to draw the human skull. I like to always begin with an egg-shaped oval for me. So let me just set this aside here and we'll begin. So the idea is if we have a front view skull here, and right here, we'll begin with our egg-shaped oval. And I want to keep this nice and light so that I can make lots of changes as we go. So it might be just a little hard for you to see initially. But basically, then we have this circular portion in here to represent the back portion of the skull, which is the parietal bones and so forth. And then this would be the center axis right here. And then if we take the halfway point and go across, that's going to help us know where the eyes would typically fall at the halfway point. So, and we'll do a couple of heads here in a minute. We'll return the head and we'll show you how this can be helpful. So in this middle section, so now what we have geometric shape. So we have this egg-shaped oval, and it gets narrower at the bottom because the base of the chin will be a little bit more narrow. And then we have the circle that's going to give us the width of the parietal bones. So now, in order to start creating something that resembles three-dimensional form, just using line only, we're not going to shade in this, we're just going to use line only to start to add in the features. We have to work inside of the shape to begin to create form. So I like to start in the center area, and in here, this would be more or less where the eye sockets are. So with the orbits of the eyes, and I'm going to use lots of kind of fun little lines, and keep it sort of light. So if I need to make changes, then we have the nose that's going to come here. We have the nasal bones. And we have the opening in here of the nasal cavity. And then coming out here, we have the maxilla. So we have those cheekbones in here, and they're going to come down here. And we'll be talking more specifically about the anatomical structure later, so I'm not going to get too much into that today. So we don't need to worry about drawing every single teeth. If we're doing a very quick, fast gesture drawing, what we're just trying to do is get the essence of the character and the shape of the skull. So and here's the orbits of the eye. This is the frontal bone. And we have the temporal ridge. And it's almost easy to think of these as like sunglasses in here. Then we have that, the opening of the nasal. You might be able to see a little bit in there. And then we'll come out here. And if we want, we can just maybe pick out just a couple of teeth just to give an indication. Then something that separates the humans from the greater apes is we have an indentation here. We have a chin. Humans have a chin. And then we have this lower section. Then we have the mandible. And you might see that little hole, the little foramen right in here. We have a few foramen. There's one up in here. There's usually one in here on either side. But we don't need to worry too much about that. And then we have the mandible. And so here we go. So just a very simple gesture drawing. But if somebody were to come up and look at this, they should feel like they can tell it's a human skull. So we'll just do this right in here so you can see where we had this axis, the line that was running through. And we had this more or less that was here at the halfway point. And we'll do a section on proportion later on where we'll go into detail with this. And then if we wanted to very quickly, to recognize that we know this usually falls into shadow. So we don't need to really necessarily shade it, but we can just do that real quick. Okay, so that would be drawing the human skull from the front view. Now, if we want to take the same concept and turn it slightly to the side, what we're going to do is always begin the same way with an egg-shaped oval. Some people like to always begin with a ball, a sphere. I like to begin with the egg-shaped oval. And then, again, so if this was the center line, right through here, if we want to turn the head slightly to the side, then we want to wrap our line around the egg-shaped oval and come back in. Now, something that's interesting that happens here that's very helpful, because when people start to turn the head, they're not sure how much to add to the back of the head. So if you would assume that this straight line that was coming right through here, we had this line here. If we have that axis going through, and we have this turning the head this way, the difference between here and here, this distance, this little span, we now add that to the back of the head. So this shape, that amount of space, and then now we add this to the back of the head, and that will help to turn the head. So now we want to think then again of the head turning. So we come in here, the eyes, again, we want to have the eyes more or less at the halfway point. And we'll have the nasal passage is going to come out in here. And then we have this section of the eye, this section here. But now, when we see the side that turns around that other side, we have to go out and come back in. Then the maxilla goes out, comes back in. And the mouth, if you think of it as this bottom section almost like a can, part of a soda can, it wraps around. It's not completely flat. So this goes out and back. This goes out, and it has to go behind the mouth or the teeth. And then the chin goes out and comes here and then goes around. And this section here, which was our egg-shaped oval, now becomes the maxilla. So now, or the mandible, excuse me. And so now we have here is the temporal ridge. So we want to think of a little bit of the anatomical structure here. We have the cavity of the eye, the frontal bone, and then we have the zygomatic arch, and we would have the teeth coming through here, and the lower teeth coming through here, and just add a little bit of this skeletal structure in here. Again, we'll talk about the anatomy in another section, so we're just mostly concerned here with the gesture drawing. So if you notice, I have lots of different lines. I've left all my lines to show. Some of them are now a little darker and a little cleaner. Then we have a little frame in here. Let's get this little nasal cavity in here. And we can now put a little bit of a tone in there, a little bit of tone in here, a little bit of tone in the nasal area. And then this was our teeth in here, and this was our chin. And the teeth wrap around. So remember, this is kind of elliptical in shape, and it has to wrap around. Most of the face is relatively flat, but the mouth is not. It's got a roundish shape. So then we have the structure in here. This goes back to by where the auditory meatus is, and in here. And then we have this portion of the mandible. And then so that's a little concept of how you would turn the head slightly. So now maybe we'll turn the head slightly, and then maybe we'll have it turn slightly and turn down a little bit. So I'll add another egg-shaped oval here, but I want it to have a slight angle here. So I'm going to turn it at a slight angle down. Again, I'm beginning with the egg-shaped oval. This would be the center line. If I want the head turned in here, and then the halfway point I want looking down through here, then that's the amount of the skull I want to add to the back of the head. So let's just, again, put this little line through the center so we can see that axis line. I think that'll be helpful for you to see how that works. And then I had the head turned sideways, so it was wrapping around and going back under. And the eyes were wrapping around the halfway point. So we're kind of getting the layout here. We have the egg-shaped oval, the back of the sphere to represent the back part of the skull. Now, we're going to have the eye socket in here, and we'll be seeing a little bit more of the top of the brow because it's turned down. So this has to go out and in. Again, our zygomatic bone goes out and in. And then we have the nasal cavity coming out here. So this is going to come out. And then we have the mouth, that rounded cylinder in here, that elliptical area, and then the chin comes out behind. And then we have the mandible. And so the same way that this wraps around at this angle, the nose has to wrap around at that angle, and the mouth has to wrap around, the teeth wrap around at the same angle. So everything is pretty much sort of parallel, and the forehead comes in at this angle. And then this goes out and it goes back. This comes out and back. So now we can darken in the nasal cavity. We can darken in the eye, the orbit of the eye, right in here. And then again, humans have chins, so this is the bottom section of the teeth, and then our chin comes out here. And we want to have, and then we have the temporal ridge, so we got to get some of the anatomical structure in here. We have the zygomatic bone. We have this zygomatic bone on this side, and we have this one here on this side. We have the ramus portion of the mandible, and then we have the zygomatic arch coming in here, and it goes back here by the ear canal, and we have that section of the skull, and there we go. So, and this will kind of connect in here. So this falls into shadow. This portion of the maxilla is also going to fall into shadow. The lower section here, a little section of the chin, and then we might see a little bit of that blade up in there. And so here's this part here, comes here, and this plane, this would form the top section, and this would form this, again, this side plane. And again, we don't need to concern ourselves when we're doing real fast, real quick gesture drawings. It's not too important that we, actually, let's kind of move this over a little bit now that we worked on it. So here's kind of the center point. Because I changed this a little bit as we were going. And just so it doesn't lead to any confusion, don't usually erase, but I don't want to confuse you. So, and there we go. So now we'll, let's do a, we haven't done the profile yet, so let's do a profile, a study of the head and profile. So then we can begin with, well, we can do a couple of those actually. Let's do one and we'll have it turned this way. So I'll start with an egg-shaped oval in here. And again, we just have our egg-shaped oval. And then we add a second oval for the back of the head. So here's that again, that center line. And we want to find this halfway point in here. And this in here, this back of the head will come a little bit below the center line. And so at the halfway point is where we're going to have the eye socket, the orbit of the eye. And it's not all the way out here on the edge. That's a mistake that most people do when they draw portraits in profile. And we'll get, we'll do a lot more detail in that later on in the later sessions. So then we have the frontal bone in here. And then we have the nasal cavity that's going to come out like this and then come back in here. And talking about facial angles, which we'll do a section on facial angles coming up, the mouth goes out and in. Frequently it looks somewhat triangular in this shape. And then we have our chin that goes out and comes back. So you want to keep it in that line with the oval. Then we have our mandible that's in here. And we have the temporal ridge in here. Then we have the maxilla. And right in here is the little spine, nasal spine. And then the spinal column would, if we were to add the spinal column, it would come down into here. So it comes in this shape. It doesn't go straight down. It comes down out of the bottom, but it has a little bit of an angle to it. So, and this connects here, and then you have the auditory meatus. And this is where the sternocleidomastoid muscle will connect. And you'd have the parietal bones and the temporal bones and so forth. And so that is more or less. So if you notice here, we have the forehead and the chin coming more or less at this angle. The nose, nasal cavity comes out at this angle. These are kind of helpful things to think about. When we do the facial angles, we'll go into a lot more detail with this. And that angle. And again, this was our center line. This kind of runs through the center here. So we started the gesture drawing with we began this with a mark, then we used line, and then we developed really simple geometric shapes. And this one we began with just a sphere and an egg-shaped oval. And this one again, here we had the egg-shaped oval, and then we turned it. Here we had the egg-shaped oval, and then we turned it. And this, in profile, it's very easy to draw. A lot of people think drawing a head in profile is one of the most challenging things. But if you keep in mind it is basically just two egg-shaped ovals, it makes it much, much easier to draw the skull in profile, and the portrait, any portrait for that matter in profile. So if we were to just think of a couple of things here, so let's just draw a few spheres here. If we want the sphere to be turned this way, so we can kind of have this come like this, we'll have this at this angle, and then we're going to have it looking down a little bit. It has to wrap around the sphere. In this way. So remember, the center of the sphere was here. But then we went from there and we turned it, we wrapped around. And that's how we want to turn this here. So if we could imagine seeing through, we'd have this ellipse. And then if we want to turn the side of the head, we can kind of have this, where we have this shape coming here at this angle. We want to parallel that line here. And then now you can see that this plane technically comes here and then wraps around. It comes here, then wraps around. So if we did the same concept here, but maybe we turn the head upwards. So we have our little lips that we see through nice and light. We have this coming around. And then we want to have that side plane. And now we have our center line coming here. Try to clean these lines a little darker so you can see them a little better. And I'm doing this pretty quick, so it may not be perfect. So here, this came across here, and then we had the side plane coming straight down. This is wrapping around here, and this side plane comes down. This wraps around here, and then goes straight back. So these are the planes that we are going to have on that sphere. So that's very helpful in turning the head. If we were doing it front view, let's see here, and we want the head looking down. Then the horizon, this line, we'll have it coming all the way down here. So we're seeing more or less most of the top of the head here. This is wrapping around, so the eyes are much lower on the sphere. And this comes here and here. And that's how you turn the head at different angles. And so here we can again have this turn slightly so that this is the top of the head, top plane, and side plane. This here, and this here, this here. So if you're going to add a nose, the nose would come out in here. If you're going to have a nose in here, it would be kind of a pointed angle in here. And this is, the eyes would fit in there. The mouth would fit underneath here, and then we'd have the chin down a little bit lower. And right in here, we'd have the chin. So now this is where we have the egg-shaped oval comes into play. Because that, even though we started this with just a sphere, the head is technically more like an egg-shaped oval. So we go here, and in this case, we're seeing the bottom of the head. So the egg-shaped oval is going to come more in this area. And now we'll see the bottom. So those are some ideas on how you turn the head and do these quick gesture drawings at different angles. So as you can see, we did the skull looking down, skull in profile, skull directly front view, skull turned side view. And when you're doing gesture drawings, these are meant to be done in just a couple of minutes. I mean, if you're sitting at a restaurant or you're at your family's house and you're at the dinner table or people are sitting around in the living room, you can just pull out your sketch pad and you can do these real fast little gesture drawings of your family members, friends, and so forth. I always like to begin this at the beginning of the year with doing the gesture drawings of the skull, because the skull is the foundation for all the muscles and flesh that goes on top of it. So if you can kind of get the hang of how you would do all of this, then putting the flesh and all the other stuff on, that's the fun part. but you really have to have a solid understanding of the skull and how that lies and lays underneath the form. So line, we started with a mark, we had line, we had geometric shapes, and as you can see, in these you can no longer see the geometric shape, you're seeing organic shape. And within those organic shape, this outside, it's very organic, it's not geometrical. Then we worked inside of the shapes to then start to add form, and we used the actual anatomical structure of the skull to add the three-dimensional quality of the skull. And again, these were just very simple, showing you how you can start with just a simple sphere and how you can turn it in different angles to get the feeling that the head is either looking down or changed in a different direction. So just grabbing this here very quickly once again. So if you see the little drawing here that we have at the side, you can see that it kind of has the character and the essence of the bone structure in that in the quick gesture drawing. Same here with the front view. If we look at this front view, you can see that it kind of captures very quickly the anatomical structure that you can see in the front view of the head. This one that it's turned and it's slightly looking down, the light might be kind of not great here, but that's kind of the angle of that one. And then we have here, very quickly, more or less, something along that line for the other one that's turned. So you can, if you find one of these little skulls somewhere, it's great to pick up. You can sometimes find these for pretty inexpensive at different places. But I like to draw from these all the time. In fact, I've done it so much that I can usually pretty much draw the skull in most positions just from memory. So that is our little section here on gesture drawing. And this is what you guys will be working on. You'll be doing a few of these, and enjoy.